Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Captain's Table radio show and podcast. This show is a play on words of our creator and producer, Tom Captain's name, but it also harkens back to the 1800s when passengers on English ships would gather for dinner, and the captain would invite his most notable guest to join them at an elevated table, and the other guests would listen to their conversations. I'm your host, Paul Koretz. I'm a retired city councilman in both the cities of West Hollywood and Los Angeles, and I'm also a former member of the state assembly. And my guest today is Keith Umemoto, a leader in state government and Democratic Party politics for many years. So, Keith, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. Hope
Well,
everything's going well with you.
yeah, well, things haven't been so great in Southern California the last few weeks, but we're getting a handle on it now. At least the fires seem to be over. I'm trying to remember when I first met you. Um, I know we were both at UCLA. We started the same year in 1973, and I started the Bruin Democratic Club with Brad Sherman and a couple other people. Do you remember if you were active in that? If I would have met you there?
Actually, probably not because I only spent my freshman year at UCLA and I was crazy. I was working at the post office from like 5:30 until 4 in the morning. That wasn't
Oh my
very
gosh.
healthy.
Well, then I do know where I met you because I worked on your father's campaign for a state assembly a couple of years later.
Yeah,
Um, and I remember you working on the campaign. So what got you involved in government and politics? What motivated you?
I think the biggest motivation is certainly my father and family and their history. And as I grew to be more aware of that history, I think was even more impassioned by being involved in politics since my parents didn't always talk about their history. Having been Japanese Americans during World War II, they faced the fate of Executive Order 9066, which actually with next week we run into the 82nd anniversary, where my parents and parents' were uprooted from their homes and shipped off to these incarceration camps, and they were at Heart Mountain, Wyoming during that time. So I kind of got a sense a little bit of that and kind of the what it meant to our way of life and facing discrimination from being uprooted, as well as my father fought during World War II on the with the 442nd, and here he's fighting in the European theater while his family's in camp. And he didn't say a whole lot about that, but he did mention particularly how so many of the Japanese American soldiers, it was a Japanese American regiment, didn't get medals that they had deserved compared to others. And so after that, certainly my parents faced a lot of continued discrimination where they couldn't buy a house and certainly being called the J word. So he was impassioned by being an anti-war person, by being someone that stood for civil rights, human rights, and trying to fight injustices. And he got involved in politics, and I tagged along sometimes. In fact, when I was 9 years old, he picked me up from elementary school. He ran for state senate back in 1966, and we drove all the way up to Palmdale. And he had his precinct sheet, and I had no idea what I was doing. And so he gave me half the sheet, uh, odd number, even number, and I said, what am I supposed to do? He says, knock on the door and tell the person to vote for your dad.
Yeah, so I think that's where I met you. I think he ran a second time for the legislature. He ran for assembly in the 70s, in the late 70s. And I worked on his campaign, and a bunch of members of the Bruin Democrats had met him and all joined in. Um, and he had a good sense of humor, and the campaign reflected that. One of the things we did was people would post yard signs with his name, but it was at the time where the most popular television show was Mary Hartman, Mary Hartman.
Hmm.
We'd post them double. It would be Kaz Umemoto, Kaz Umemoto. And I think people enjoyed the joke. Um, and he wasn't supposed to be serious. I remember a friend of mine, David Panish, worked on a campaign for a fellow named Bert Wilson. And he said, there's four serious candidates, and Kaz isn't one of them. Why are you even working on this campaign? And ironically, Kaz finished in the top four and Bert Wilson finished fifth, just because everybody worked so hard and he was so beloved. Um, and you obviously followed that. What are some of the things you've done in democratic politics?
Well, like I said before, he took me from the very beginning at the age of 9 to walk precincts, and then when he ran again in 1977 for that special election to fill the seat vacated by Mike Bruce, walking precincts back then, it sort of evolved where when I got my master's degree. I worked out a arrangement with the school to have a field placement at Willie Brown's LA district office. And a person by the name of Linda Unruh was there, and she was the president of the California Young Democrats, and she recruited me to be an officer, and also Marguerite Archie Hudson was the staff director. Well, initially the staff director was Gloria Molina, but that was only for a couple months, and then she was running for assembly.
Boy,
But
all very
Marguerite,
notable names in
yeah,
politics and government in LA history.
yeah. And so with Marguerite, I just said to her, she was circulating her petition to run for office, and it says, "Hey, let me help you out." And so got my family and friends, and we ended up getting about 700 signatures for her, and she was flabbergasted. So I continued with YDs and never stopped since, trying to fight for the quality of life and some of the things that I stand for in terms of civil rights. So I've been was involved with YDs and then was on the California Democratic Party executive board. And my father in 1988 happened to run when party activists were allowed to run for the Democratic National Committee. He won, but unfortunately he passed away in February 29th, 1992. And so I get a couple phone calls almost immediately following. It says, hey, Keith, you ought to take his spot. And I've been doing that ever since with the Democratic National Committee and the State Democratic Party.
So what's it been like being on the Democratic National Committee?
It's been really challenging. Obviously, I'm an advocate on certain issues and think grassroots is so integral. So was really happy when Howard Dean established the 50 state strategy because that meant grassroots in 50 states throughout the country. But um, I led the effort to reestablish the Asian American Pacific Islander caucus of the DNC after it was eliminated. And because of that, I saw and opened my eyes how integral each of the caucuses to the Democratic Party and the constituency that since all politics is local, we should localize it also from constituencies. And I've been a big advocate with the party in trying to get resources so that we do those grassroots efforts within those constituencies.
And we've seen some landmark elections. We just had one. Jessica Calosa was the first Filipina to be elected to the state legislature in this past election. And so I think there's been a lot of success there with the API community. Let's see. I think we're probably due for a commercial break. So
Okay.
let's hear from our sponsors for a few minutes, and then we'll be right back.
Your addiction could cost you everything: your job, your children, your loved ones, maybe even your life. Face it, you need help. Call Better Addiction Care now. It's time to end your addiction to drugs and alcohol. Help is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no matter who you are, where you're located, or your financial situation. Our network of treatment centers can guide you before it's too late and you hurt yourself or your loved ones again. We're Better Addiction Care and can help put an end to your addiction. Plus, your insurance may cover up to 100% of costs. Don't wait another moment. Your life could depend on making the call right now. There's still time to get back what addiction has taken away. This could be the most important call of your life.
Call 800-247-0941. 800-247-0941. 800-247-0941. That's 800-247-0941.
Fans of The Andy Griffith Show are raving about a brand new streaming series.
Chris Stone, what are you doing back here in Mayberry?
Your neighbors know they're living next door to a famous movie star yet?
He hasn't answered any of my calls.
That girl's headed right for Heartbreak Alley.
An old-fashioned love story in a modern-day Mayberry.
Yes!
A streaming series for the whole family.
Who's the only TV character named after two insects? And bee, of course.
Grandma's cat ate all the laxatives, and, well, we've got ourselves a situation.
Crazy, right?
Don't take any wooden nickels. Wooden nickels. That's a good one.
Those low-down, dirty buzzards.
It's an honor to be here. In fact, at my age, it's an honor to be anywhere.
It's a Christmas miracle.
Bravissimo.
We don't know what you're missing.
Mayberry Man, the series. Now available on Prime Video.
These people are living in another world.
For anyone who's worried about back taxes, has not filed tax returns, and doesn't know what to do next, stop and listen. Not filing your taxes can have severe consequences, especially in this political climate. Now that COVID is over, the IRS is getting aggressive, massively increasing enforcement and collection efforts. With politicians making all sorts of promises, especially when it comes to taxes, hiding and not dealing with your taxes will cause you harsh legal and financial ramifications. But right now, the IRS offers forgiveness and writes off a massive amount of tax debt. The Tax Doctor offers a free service that helps people get out of IRS collections and back in good standing with the government. Don't hide or bury your head in the sand. Take advantage of our free service. Call now to learn more. 800-368-1307. 800-368-1307. 800-368-1307. That's 800-368-1307.
We're back with Keith Umemoto on the Captain's Table. And Keith, what do you think about politics and government today? We've been through a wild election and a very bizarre and eventful aftermath of that. What are your thoughts, and what role should the Democratic Party be playing right now?
Well, it's definitely a lot different than it was 30, 40 years ago, where Republicans and Democrats can have their political fights and then later go out and have lunch or dinner together and be sort of friends. And I don't see that occurring, because I think the political dynamics have severed a lot of those relationships and ability to establish those relationships. Because I almost think when I look at what we're saying today about how extreme things are And the current administration seems to suggest that it's his way or no way. And I use the term his because I really don't even think it's the Republican Party's position, where there may be some room for negotiations with the Democrats, of which um, I think people's minds coming together uh, can resolve some of the major solutions to some of the problems we face. But the way it is today, it's like um, we're going to look at politics more as hopefully, to a certain degree, a pendulum, and hopefully the pendulum goes back in our direction. But if it, uh, and then ceases there, where there's some more middle ground where we work together and making the country or local governments and the whole quality of life better. Um, it's been pretty frustrating to see uh, the rule of law being pretty much ignored at this time at the federal level, and uh, it's pretty frightening. I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that it doesn't get to the degree that, like I said, hopefully it is a pendulum and it isn't something that's going to last that lifetime that it possibly can if we get ideologues, particularly on the federal bench, and ruling only in their personal position as opposed to the rule of law
which is clearly what we've seen ever
lately.
since there's been the 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court. And I think you also hear a lot that Republicans behind the scenes will admit that one policy or another of Trump's is just all out crazy,
Mhm.
but no one's willing to raise their head and have a chance to have it chopped off. So they're very careful about what they say publicly,
Yeah,
which
I
is
totally agree. And I think so much of it has to do with the Supreme Court decision on Citizens United, where um, campaigns, a billionaire can spend literally a $250 million and influence how people um, vote. And actually, in terms of what we're saying today at the federal level, um, approving these appointments that in a normal circumstance they wouldn't, but only for the fear of self-preservation. They decided that they're going to confirm uh, all these individuals that have absolutely no qualification for their position, and in fact, a lot of them are who are being appointed. Their philosophy is contrary to the position they're taking. In and unfortunately, that's what we're facing right now.
right. I mean, Trump is certainly as anti-environmental as anyone,
Mhm.
any president you could ever find. So whomever he appoints to the EPA, for instance, is there to
Mhm.
dismantle the agency as much as they can. I mean, they have a postmaster general who's been trying to destroy the post office since he was appointed in Trump's first term. It's all pretty crazy. And I was around when this started to happen in California. The exact moment was in the year 2001. Jim Brulte, who was the leader of the Republicans at the time in the legislature, decided that the Republicans were just going to stop the budget and they were never going to let it through as an exercise. And we needed a couple votes, and they threatened all their members, if you vote for this budget, it's the end of your career. And I think they needed 4 votes. And
Mhm.
sure enough, they got 4 courageous people, and they were all gone in no time.
Yes.
After that, Republicans were largely just very partisan, and it became a much more partisan and not as collegial state legislature. And I actually had some Republicans that told me they would vote against any bill, no matter how good it was, that I authored, just because I was a liberal Democrat.
Yeah, they didn't want to give you any credit for the good work and good ideas that you had.
But
And
there are still people that were friends, though. I mean, I had Republican friends in the legislature,
mhm, mhm.
but because there was still a little vestige of that. I don't know if that even exists now, um, but it's just been crazy. Uh, Now, you also have had a long career in California government. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the positions that you've held and the things that you did and things that were most important.
Sure. I had the opportunity to be an appointee of Governor Gray Davis at Trade and Commerce Agency, and was there for 4 years until, because it was a general fund agency, it didn't last too much longer because of the Enron situation, where it basically blew up the California budget. And being a general fund agency, it ended up being the victim. But I was real proud that we were moving forward in trying to grow, um, not just business, but business tied to making sure that we had good paying jobs. Um, as that began to unfold because of the budget, I ended up getting another appointment with the OSHA Standards Board. And it was a pretty exciting place because as folks may know, that California administers its own OSHA program called Cal OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health. And I was in charge of the rulemaking, or the standards board, at the point in time. And we were able to do some phenomenal things, like the first in the nation heat illness regulation. It has been improved since, but after several farm workers passed away in the heat of the summer, or beginning of the summer, there was some urgency to doing something about it, as well as a lot of other rulemakings that were protecting uh, workers, and actually to a great degree protecting our way of life. So I left there because the board transformed into a board that seemed to want to water down OSHA standards. In particular, the one that broke the back of my decision was when they decided to change our regulation on nail guns, when 600,000 people were getting injured with nail guns every year. And the industry wanted to get rid of the requirement that the employers adhered to um, the manufacturer's safety standards, and replace it with just training. And I looked at it as, well, they're just trying to get out from liability. And during that rulemaking, we're seeing people actually, literally, several CNN had a clip on someone dying because of nail guns, and one of the board members, in fact, was saying, "We get nail gun injuries every week." She was a safety officer with a framing contractor, and at that point in time, when I was, for all intents and purposes, in a position where we were watering down because of the new composition of the board during the Schwarzenegger administration. I decided it was time to leave, and then went to Department of Rehabilitation, where I became the chief of planning. And uh, I sort of reinvented how they did their needs assessment and state plan to the federal government, because before I started that, we'd have 5 hearings, and maybe a dozen people cumulatively out of the 5 hearings, and I presented to the director uh, the proposition that we can integrate our needs assessment with our state plan hearing process and ask our stakeholders questions that will really make our state plan stronger. And when I retired and left, we probably had about 50 to 100 people at each of the hearings instead of a fraction of one hearing cumulatively at all five. And so we probably had 250 to 500 people participating and had a really solid needs assessment, finding out what stakeholders really wanted and making the program better, which to me was so important. And having goals that really reflected trying to improve the quality of life of people with disabilities. And as people talk about Department of Ed and the federal level, that's where Department of Rehabilitation gets its money. And it seems like one of the priorities of the new Trump administration to eliminate Department of Ed. So I don't know what's going to happen with those resources.
Well, I think it's probably what I consider a typical Republican philosophy, which is education should be for those who can afford it, and anyone that can't afford it doesn't deserve it, which is obviously not a position that the majority of people, perhaps not even the majority of Republican rank and file holds, but I think the majority of Republican legislators seem to, and I think that's what we're headed. And what you were saying about Schwarzenegger, he was a very anti-union guy. There were some things where I thought he was a reasonable governor, particularly on environmental issues, but on labor issues and employee safety, worker safety, I was the chair of the labor committee from 2003 to 2006. And during that period of time, I think he vetoed some 30 odd bills that I did that were pro-labor and pro-worker safety and never signed one. He was just very anti-labor. And, he also vetoed legislation to guarantee that employers paid their employees what they were supposed to and overtime, and didn't make them work extra hours illegally. It was very unfortunate. But you were saying that you were the head of planning, the chief of planning. What did that really entail? What exactly was that position?
Well, essentially, the California Department of Rehabilitation is required to submit its state plan for its federal dollars. And so being chief of planning, one of my responsibilities was to submit our state plan to the feds. The other element that's required of the Department of Rehab is to do every 3 years to conduct a needs assessment. And so lo and behold, we're cutting back on staff. We used to contract that function out. And my boss said, Keith, we've got a new assignment. We're supposed to do it internally without contracting out. I didn't mind so much that, but I wish they would have provided me additional staff to do it. So we ended up doing that. And being the social worker that I am and trying to build a program from the bottom up versus the top down, I took the viewpoint of trying to be so inclusive of our stakeholders, from providers to people with the different disabilities, and providing them with a voice in terms of our programming and how we could better serve people with disabilities. And also with the disparity of different populations of not getting the services, because it wasn't a program where everyone with a disability could get service. So we needed to develop an infrastructure And when I left, they were trying to begin developing infrastructure to reach out to groups that weren't tapping into the system for various reasons that we found through our needs assessment. Um, and actually, some of those needs assessments are pretty applicable when I think about Democratic Party politics and reaching out to different communities.
What do you think happens to some of these agencies as as there's an effort to cut them and possibility of success in completely eliminating or cutting some of these agencies that you worked with? What does that do to our funding in California?
Well, the big fear to me is with what's happening in DC right now is so many of our programs across the board, we get federal dollars, and this administration, by cutting off the lifeline of on funding, um, it's going to debilitate a lot of programming in some areas, particularly in the research area, the health area. It literally will sever research, and they'll have to restart some of that research because they have to have continuity in some of the health related research in terms of diseases and things like that. And I'm real fearful of the consequence of what we're seeing at the federal level on that itself. And just like when we think about stem cell and during the Bush administration, where they stopped allowing the use of stem cell for research, what that ended up meaning is it limited the capacity of those in doing research. Who knows? Maybe we would have been able to find certain cures for Alzheimer's or some other illnesses had it not been for the disruption and those kind of research that unfortunately we may be experiencing in the next 4 years.
How much do you think we'll see as a result of RFK Jr.'s appointment?
I think it's twofold. I mean, we already seen his example in America Samoa, where there was a measles outbreak because of his anti-vax position. I think that position's going to spread further and further, especially with the way people are getting their information and fake media. Obviously, during this past election, quite a few people were getting misinformation and believing this misinformation. Well, that gives Robert Kennedy a larger platform for that misinformation, even though he may have said to when he was being before Congress for his confirmation, denied a lot of things. It's very clear his position, his public position on vaccination and science. Um, the only saving grace is some of the environmental issues may be okay, but it pales in comparison to the harm that it will do and just the cutting of USAID. It's frightening what may happen. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if within the next several years we're going to see bird flu uh, mutating where it's going to expose it to humans. And in fact, it's funny. I think about that because when I was with OSHA, we're actually looking at that as a possibility because there was a lot of bird flu in China at the time. Fortunately, it has not mutated, but as we know, viruses continue to mutate, and who knows um, uh, where that evolution of that virus will take us. But regardless, there's going to be another round. What is it going to be? COVID? Is it going to be bird flu? Some other virus is going to appear and mutate, and we need hard science and good quality researchers to make sure it doesn't spread throughout. And with Robert Kennedy at the helm, I think it's going to debilitate some of the research behind it.
The harm that Kennedy does, the harm that cutting USAID. I mean, literally, it could be thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of deaths could happen in the United States and worldwide as a result, which is just a tragic thought. And
Yeah, I totally agree.
on that not very uplifting note, I
No,
think
not at all.
time for another break to hear from our sponsors.
This important national healthcare update is brought to you by the Hearing Helpline. Now, you can make a free phone call and save big over what you'd pay at a doctor's office for hearing aids. Plus, this offer comes with a 1-year warranty. And if you call in the next 10 minutes, shipping is 100% free. We have a nationally known hearing aid that has improved the hearing of thousands of happy customers. And you'll pay a fraction of retail hearing aids prices. These outstanding hearing aids are nearly invisible. You can even use them to answer your cell phone. And they come with a 45-day money-back guarantee. You have nothing to lose and better hearing to gain. I urge you to improve your hearing for you and your loved ones and call the Hearing Helpline now. 800-208-2172. 800-208-2172. 800-208-2172. That's 800-208-2172.
Ready to make your brand stand out? At Amplify AI Media, we combine the power of artificial intelligence with creative expertise to elevate your marketing strategy. Our AI-driven approach ensures that every decision is data-backed, every campaign is targeted, and every result is impactful. We amplify your brand's voice louder and clearer than ever before. Amplify AI Media, where innovation meets precision. Visit amplifymedia.ai. Why settle for ordinary when extraordinary is within reach?
Listen up, fellow timeshare owners. If you're a timeshare owner and you want out at all costs, you're done, frustrated, tired of wasting money, you don't use the darn thing. Get out now. Hire the best bulldog timeshare cancellation team in the business. Their in-house legal team, headed by a timeshare cancellation lawyer, can help you fight the biggest and baddest companies out there that sell timeshare. At some point, you were using your timeshare, but now you're not, and you're tired of wasting money. Before you go to the poorhouse, call right now and learn how you can stop the maintenance fees and put more money back in your pocket. Their services cost you a lot less than you think, and you'll save a lot of money over time. Call the Timeshare Exit Hotline now. It's a free consultation.
800-879-1145. 800-879-1145. 800-879-1145. That's 800-879-1145.
Hi, we're back on the Captain's Table radio and podcast show, and I'm your host for this segment, former council member and assembly member Paul Koretz. And we're here with my guest, Keith Umemoto, who is a longtime Democratic Party leader and California government leader as well. Welcome back, Keith.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about another position that you're in. And of course, I've known you since we were both a lot younger in the 70s. But quietly, you are now involved in a state retiree organization, which is hard for me to believe. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what that is and what it does and what you do with that organization.
Well, actually, I'm integral and an officer to two retiree groups. One is the California State Retirees, where I'm serving as executive vice president, and the other is being treasurer to the California Alliance for Retired Americans. And both of them have some parallel in terms of what their mission, and that's retirement security. California State Retirees is pretty much focused with retirees of the state of California. So our focal point is making sure that CalPERS, the California Public Employee Retirement System, has the resources to continue to pay for our pensions and getting the return on investment that's necessary to do so, as well as the health benefits for state retirees, which involves pretty much a lot of advocacy work and monitoring regarding both our health benefits as well as our pension fund. And in particular, I think some of the alarming parts are in the health and related benefit side because of the costs that are ever increasing. And to me, in a frightening level, where we're seeing double-digit inflation or additional costs that the state has to invest into health benefits. And then in particular for seniors, our dental benefits and vision benefits, but particularly a dental benefit, working on to see to the degree that that there could be a little bit more flexibility and other options for our dental care because as we grow older, there's much more demand on our dental services. With the California Alliance for Retired Americans, we're much more broad-based, and our advocacy goes beyond specifically retirees, but to make sure that the quality of life for all Californians are uplifted, and especially noting that seniors in the retirement years are on fixed income. So housing is also an important issue, and the cost of rent, and trying to stabilize that and other related housing, as well as healthcare, as Ann mentioned earlier. So my role in both organizations is pretty much as an organizer and advocate and on various policy issues related to whether it be pensions, housing, healthcare, dental benefit.
What's the strategy to keep the healthcare within range so the state can continue to pay for its retirees?
I would have to admit that we're not the most successful on that, but is trying to get the state to have be more aggressive in negotiating the premiums for the insurance that are provided to retirees, which to a certain degree means also to all seniors and all Californians. And so we try to raise issues and help provide information to the CalPERS board and staff to better negotiate the premiums. I I don't know how effective we've been since this last year. There's been obviously double-digit increases in premium rates for across the board for retirees. Very few of the providers haven't exceeded or pretty much the average is pretty close to double digits. But that doesn't mean uh, just because you're not successful, you don't keep on pushing to try to make sure some of that occurs. And that's where I think CARA, California Alliance for Retired Americans, and other avenues on state and federal policy are so important, such as more recently, hopefully it doesn't get some of it doesn't get rescinded, but the Biden administration, when they were capping insulin to those on Medicare, they were hoping to expand that to more broadly. And then in addition, on Medicare, the Biden administration has negotiated pharmaceutical cost to, I think during the summer, 10 widely used prescription drugs that will cut some costs down. But it's a long road ahead because there's a lot of areas that I think we need to look at to see how we can control those costs without sacrificing services.
Yeah, it's a long time battle, and I don't think we'll get much assistance from the federal government in the next 4 years, unfortunately. How do you think we're doing in terms of state pension funding? I know from way back when I was there 20 years ago, that we're always arguing about whether our pensions were funded adequately. with the Republicans often arguing that we should reduce our payouts until we get a higher percentage of that funded. How are we doing now, and anything that your organizations are doing to try and help with that?
Yeah, I think there have been some marked improvements into the stability of the pension fund itself. I think the actuarials that were conducted back in 1999 uh, weren't, well, clearly weren't that accurate at the point in time, because they made assumptions on the return on investment on the funds that both the state or public agencies and the employees put into the pension fund. But I think with the amendments that took place, particularly the last one in 2014, there's a lot of stability, and it's looking pretty good at this point in time. I think we're between 75 to 80% funded. We're trying to work with CalPERS on trying to make sure that the return on investment of that fund, which is, by the way, the largest pension fund in the country at over $500 billion, gets a solid return on investment. I do sidebars and talking to some of the CalPERS members to make sure that they make sure that their risk isn't so high that a collapse that we've seen in the stock market doesn't adversely affect the pension fund like we've seen in the past. But there is clearly the fund is much more stable than it was 10 years ago.
I know in Los Angeles, I think our assumptions have been overly conservative. So we've, I think, dropped our assumptions to 7% a year. And I think in recent years, we're probably more like double or triple that. So we're in better shape also than people anticipated.
Yeah, CalPERS reduced their assumption of return on the investment at 6.8%, which means employers and employees are paying more now, but it makes for greater stability on the fund itself. While before it was in excess of 7%, which was a little bit more optimistic than it should have been.
Hey, Keith, I think we're going to take one more commercial break. So
All
let's
right.
a word from our sponsors.
Is diabetes keeping you from enjoying life's special moments? At US Med, we understand the challenges you face, and we're here to help.
With US Med, I can finally manage my diabetes without it managing me.
US Med offers a wide range of services to simplify your diabetes care. Personalized care plans, convenient access to cutting-edge diabetes tech, and knowledgeable support. Plus, we'll check your insurance so your diabetes care may be covered at little or no cost to you.
With US Med, I feel confident and control of my diabetes. I can finally live my life to the fullest.
Don't let diabetes hold you back. Choose US Med and experience better birthdays, better adventures, better anniversaries, and better everything. Call now. US Med. Better service, better care.
800-659-7805. 800-659-7805. 800-659-7805. That's 800-659-7805.
Are you interested in financial technology or science topics? How about underreported issues? If so, check out the news media outlet, UCAS News and UCAS Studios. That's www.ucasstudios.com.
Are you confused about Medicare? Center for Healthcare Rights is here to help. The Health Insurance Counseling and Advocacy Program, or HICAP, offers LA County residents free, unbiased information to guide you through Medicare options, enrollment, and benefits. To schedule your free counseling session, call us at 1-800-434-0222. That's 1-800-434-0222, or visit healthcarerights.org. Center for Healthcare Rights. We help people navigate Medicare.
Okay, we are running a car drive right now to help veterans all across America. So if you have an old car, truck, or van, even a motorcycle or an RV sitting around, you can right now give it away and help the vets. They really need your help. And your car will help support the vets and their families. And guess what? You even get a tax donation. Plus, we'll even come and pick up your car for free. And all you've got to do is pick up your phone right now and make a free call. Now is the perfect time to do something good for the vets. Give back to the vets right now for all they've done for this country. And your old car can really help them. So call the Veterans Car Donation Program right now for free pickup of your vehicle. Help the vets and help your taxes at the same time. Call right now.
800-890-1032. 800-890-1032. 800-890-1032. That's 800-890-1032.
So we're back at the Captain's Table radio show and podcast. I'm Paul Koretz, today's host, and we are here with Keith Umemoto, a longtime Democratic Party leader and state government leader. Keith, I was just thinking back to the Democratic Party side. I know you went to a number of state and national conventions. What was that experience like for you, especially the national convention?
I mean, each convention has been unique in themselves, and this last one in particular, where our nominee was determined on a conference or a virtual vote, because President Biden dropped out of the race and ended up being several candidates, but Vice President Harris secured enough delegates to be nominated. And it was an amazing convention this year, where virtually everyone seemed to be very supportive. Although I was real fearful that it gave some false sense of too much optimism in the race. Although a lot of the speakers would say, no, the election's not over, and clearly those that were saying that were correct. And then the prior one in 2000, we had a virtual one because of COVID. And that was a pretty amazing. And fortunately, the point in time after the South Carolina primary, it evolved where Joe Biden was going to have the necessary delegates for the nomination. But probably the most contentious was the one with Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. And people looked at it per se as a grassroots versus the Democratic Party institution. I didn't totally look at it that way, but it was pretty amazing in terms of how it fell out. And the unfortunate part is I got the feeling that a certain percentage of the people that were supporting Bernie did not come to the fold like the most of the people that were supporting Hillary when she lost to Obama. I think most of them, I mean, very few did not join in electing Obama as president. So I mean, you think that you go away with the message. I think some of the convention hoopla. If I were to redesign how they do it, I would redesign in terms of the messaging that the Democratic Party and our nominee carry forward, because I think it ended up being a message that I don't think reached to working men and women, particularly those that had minimum wage jobs or had to work two jobs to survive, and the kitchen table issues were not highlighted. And on the other hand, also this past convention, I looked at the one of the areas where we did make some gains are voters 65 and older, and I was sort of surprised, being a senior myself, that we didn't emphasize more on Social Security and Medicare during the campaign. And unfortunately, we may be seeing some of the fallback on what this current administration is going to do on some of those programs.
It's also, it's very bizarre to me, and I'm not sure how we correct it, but the fact that the Democratic Party's always been the party of working people, and Republicans have changed their rhetoric a little bit. They haven't changed their actions, so they're still not the party of middle class and lower class and working class individuals, but they talk a better game. I mean, there's no sign that the same party that is run more and more by a group of billionaires, especially Elon Musk, is the party of working people and trying to cut taxes for the people that need it, as opposed to the people that really don't. They're trying to keep those trillions in tax cuts for billionaires going. It's just amazing to me.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
the party needs to find some better ways to market themselves and get their real positions out versus their opponents.
I totally agree. A big part of the last Democratic National Committee meeting when we elected our chair was one, financing, and two, well, first was messaging, and two, grassroots organizing. And but I think we need to take light on how people get their information in addition to that. There was some discussion about that, but not nearly as much, because when we really you look at the landscape, who controls the media and the various media sources? It's the billionaires, and we saw evidence of it where the endorsements of some of the predominant newspapers were withheld because of who controlled those papers.
Right. Most painfully was the LA Times, which clearly had an editorial board that was, moving towards an endorsement of Harris, and they were just neutered by their owner, who obviously wanted to curry favor with Donald Trump, which
So
is
I
not.
almost think there needs to be a look at that strategy. How do we have an impact on it in this day and age of the super rich controlling the media? Are there other avenues? I mean, this is probably this podcast is probably a great example of that. How do you recreate that enough times where it's going to reach out to enough people, where they realize that some of this information about who's really what party, what platform is better for working people in particular. And that's one of our challenges. And certainly there are other instances that occurred during the course of the campaign that were really detrimental to the Harris campaign itself, in terms of just what was happening in the Middle East and the amount of spending in Ukraine, and the worst, of course, is the inflation that was happening in the United States, because kitchen table issues were elevated. And then all of a sudden, immigration was probably 10th or 11th on people's interest 4 years ago, and it became one of the top three issues of 2024.
Well, once people started being told that immigrants were eating people's dogs and cats,
Yeah.
which, I mean, eventually it was exposed as a fraud, but I don't know how many people still believe that to this day. It's a bizarre time when the most outlandish things are stated as fact and can be believed.
Yeah, the credibility of the information that we get is pretty frightening. And I don't know how you, I guess that's the billion-dollar question. How do we address that?
Yeah, I mean, there's less and less media left, and what media there is seems to be owned by billionaires that either love Trump or are cowed by him at the very least. Well, it's been very interesting having this conversation with you, and thank you for joining us here on the Captain's Table, Keith Umemoto.
Well, thanks so much.
We appreciate your good work over the course of your career, and thank you so much for joining us. And everybody out there, please join us next week for our next episode of the Captain's Table. Thank you for listening.